The bag was hidden under the floorboards in the cellar. Not my cellar. My sister-in-law's. 3 farms down the dirt road behind the shelf where she kept the canning jars. Underneath a loose board I had tested 3 times to make sure it didn't creak. Inside it, 1 change of plain clothes, $43 I had saved coin by coin from selling eggs at market, a folded piece of paper with an address written in pencil, and a small photograph of my mother taken the year before she married. The only photograph I had ever owned. I had been building that bag for 8 months. My name is Martha. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio. I left, eventually. But not the first time I tried. And what happened between the first attempt and the day I finally walked out the door is the story I have spent 3 years working up the courage to tell. If you have ever planned an escape and been caught before you reached the door, I see you. Subscribe to this channel because what I share here are the things my community spent 26 years making sure I would never say out loud. I want to tell you something about Amish marriage that the documentaries never get right. From the outside, it looks simple. The plain clothes, the quiet farms, the large families, the wooden furniture, the pies cooling on the windowsill. People drive through Lancaster and Holmes County on weekends and take photographs from their car windows and say, "How peaceful, how simple." What they cannot see from the car window is what happens inside the house when the door is closed. I married Jonas when I was 19. He was 25. He had a farm, a reputation for good work, and a father who was a deacon in our church district. In Amish courtship, those 3 things together meant he was considered an excellent match. My parents were pleased. His parents were pleased. The bishop announced our intentions before the congregation on a Sunday in October. I remember sitting on the hard wooden bench that morning and feeling the weight of everyone's approval like a second dress over my regular one. Heavy, itchy in places I could not scratch. The thing I did not understand yet, the thing no one explains to a 19-year-old Amish girl before her wedding, is that approval from the community and safety inside a marriage are 2 completely different things. They can exist together. They can also exist entirely apart. It took me about 18 months to understand which kind of marriage I was in. I am not going to tell you that Jonas was a monster. The truth is more complicated than that, and I think the complicated truth is more useful to you than a simple villain would be. Jonas was a man shaped entirely by a world that had never once asked him to question himself. He had been told since birth that a husband leads and a wife follows. He had been told that a woman's submission was not just expected but holy, that it was her primary act of faithfulness before God. He had been told that a man who kept his household in order, who provided, who maintained the rules of the Ordnung, was a good man by definition. He believed all of it, completely, without the smallest crack of doubt. And inside that belief, there was no room for my discomfort. My unhappiness was not information. It was a spiritual problem. It meant I was not yielding the way a wife was supposed to yield. It meant I was struggling against the order God had designed. Every time I was unhappy, the solution was the same. Pray more, work harder, submit better. That is the theology of control, dressed in the language of faith. I know that now. Inside it, I did not have words for what I was living. I only had the feeling of the walls getting closer. The first time I thought about leaving was in the middle of a Tuesday in February, 2 years into our marriage. I was standing at the kitchen sink washing the breakfast dishes, and I looked out the window at the snow on the fields, and I had a thought so clear and so quiet it frightened me. I do not want to be here anymore. Not the farm, not the county, not the church district, not the life that had been arranged around me like furniture in a room I had never been asked to decorate. I pushed the thought down immediately. Thoughts like that were not permitted. Thoughts like that were the devil working on a weak and faithless woman. I scrubbed the pan harder and said a silent prayer and tried to mean it, but the thought had already been thought. And thoughts, once allowed into the room, have a way of coming back. It took me 6 more months before the thought turned into a plan. I had a cousin, Rebecca, who had left the community 4 years before I married. She had been shunned, of course. Her name was not spoken in our house. But before she left, she had pressed a piece of paper into my hand at a family gathering and said only, "If you ever need somewhere to go." I had kept that paper for 3 years folded inside the lining of my winter bonnet. The address on it was in Columbus, a women's organization. I did not know exactly what it was. I only knew it was the one thread I had been holding onto without knowing why. When I finally started building the bag, I did it slowly, over months, the way you build anything in the Amish world, one small piece at a time, without calling attention to the work. The $43 took the longest. Egg money was the only money that passed through my hands directly, $1 here, $2 there, pushed to the bottom of my apron pocket and later hidden in the toe of a boot I kept at my sister-in-law's farm, on the pretense that I had outgrown it and she might use the leather. I told myself I was only preparing. I told myself I might never use the bag. Having it was just having a door in a room that had no doors. I was not planning to walk through it necessarily. I was just planning to know it existed. That is what I told myself. Women in impossible situations are very skilled at lying to themselves just gently enough to keep moving forward. There is a part of this story I cannot tell you here. Not on this platform, not under these rules. The algorithm has limits, and I have learned exactly where they are. So I wrote the rest down instead, slowly, without the softening, without the cuts. Everything the camera is not permitted to show. The book is called The Ordnung They Never Wrote Down. 208 pages of what plain life looks like from the inside of it. The link is in the first comment of this video. That is where the part I could not say out loud lives. Jonas found the bag on a Wednesday. I know it was a Wednesday because I had been at my sister-in-law's farm the day before helping her with a frolic, a work gathering, the kind where women come together to quilt or clean or put up preserves. I had checked the bag that Tuesday, just to check it, just to know it was there. And then I had come home, made supper, put the children to bed, and gone to sleep beside my husband the way I did every night. I do not know exactly how he found it. I have turned it over in my mind for years, whether someone saw me, whether he followed me once and I did not notice, whether he had been watching more carefully than I understood. What I know is that on Wednesday evening, after supper, after the children were in bed, he came into the kitchen where I was cleaning up. He set the bag on the table. He did not say anything at first. He set it down in the center of the table the way you set down evidence, the way the bishop sets down a passage of scripture before a hard sermon. Deliberate, letting the weight of it speak before any words did. I looked at the bag. I looked at him. My hands went still in the dishwater. He said, "I know what this is." I did not answer. There was nothing to say that would not make it worse, and part of me, a strange, calm part of me I had not met before, knew that. So I stood there with my hands in the cooling water and I waited. What followed was not what I expected, and that is the part that took me the longest to understand, and that I believe is the most important thing I can tell you. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. That was something I had not understood yet about certain kinds of control, that the ones practiced by men who believe they are righteous do not require shouting. Shouting is for men who are not confident. Jonas was completely confident. He sat down at the table. He opened the bag. He took out each item, one at a time, the clothes, the $43, which he counted slowly, the paper with the address, which he read without any visible reaction, and then folded and put in his shirt pocket. The photograph of my mother. He held the photograph for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "You were going to take this." It was not a question. But I nodded. He was quiet for what felt like several minutes. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the horses shifted in the barn. Then he said, "I am not angry with you. I am concerned for you. A woman who would leave her husband and her children and her community is a woman whose faith has failed. This is not your fault. This is my failure as a leader of this household. I have not been guiding you properly. I want you to understand what those words did to me. They took my reality, my actual living experience of the past 2.5 years, and they reframed it completely. My need to leave was not valid information about my circumstances. It was a symptom of my spiritual weakness, and his job was to correct it. That is the move. That specific move. If you grew up inside any kind of closed community and religious, familial, any kind, you may recognize it. The moment when your experience of your own life is handed back to you renamed. What he did next was methodical. He told my father-in-law the following Sunday after church. Not what he had found. He did not tell anyone what he had found. What he told the deacon was that Martha was struggling spiritually and would benefit from more community support and accountability. He used those exact words. Struggling spiritually. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 women visiting me regularly. Elder women from our church district. Good women, devout women, women who genuinely believed they were helping me. They came to sit with me, to pray with me, to talk about yielding and faith and the blessings of a plain life. They were also, without understanding it themselves, ensuring I was never alone long enough to rebuild what I had lost. The $43 never came back to me. The address was gone. The photograph, he returned the photograph eventually, set it on the nightstand without comment. I think he understood that keeping it would have made a cruelty visible that he preferred to keep invisible. The bag itself he burned. He told me he burned it in the field behind the barn. He told me this matter-of-factly, the way you report that you have mended a fence or repaired a wheel. He never mentioned it again. Not once. In 4 more years of marriage, we never spoke of the bag, the address, the $43, or that Wednesday evening. That was the most effective part. Not the surveillance, not the elder women, not the removal of every practical resource I had built. The silence. The complete erasure of the event from our shared language. Because when a thing cannot be named, it cannot be organized into meaning. And when something cannot be organized into meaning, the person who experienced it begins to doubt the experience itself. I began to wonder genuinely whether what I remembered had happened the way I remembered it, whether I had been wrong about what the bag meant, whether the concern he had expressed had actually been love. That doubt is not weakness. I need you to understand that. That doubt is what happens when the people around you collectively agree on a version of events that does not include your version. It is not a character flaw. It is what happens to human beings inside systems that are designed to produce it. I left 4 years later, not with a bag, not with money I had saved coin by coin. I left in a way I did not plan, on a day I did not expect, with almost nothing, and I have never once regretted it. The shunning came quickly. It always does. Phone calls that went unanswered. My mother's face at the door before she turned away from it. The slow erasure of myself from every photograph, every conversation, every dinner table I had sat at my whole life. In the months after I left, I found a therapist in Columbus, not far from the address that had once been on that paper. The paper that was long gone. She asked me once, in the careful language therapists use, to describe the Wednesday evening with the bag. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What he did was very effective, wasn't it?" It was not a question. And something about hearing it named, effective, as a mechanism, as a tactic, as something with a name, cracked a wall I had been pressing against for years. Because the opposite of effective is ineffective, and ineffective means it did not have to work. It only worked because I did not yet know it had a name. Knowledge is what changes the equation. Not strength, not courage, not faith. Information. Knowing what something is called, knowing that other people have lived it and survived it and named it, is the thing that makes it possible to walk toward the door. That is why I am here. Talking to a camera. Saying the things I was taught my whole life to keep silent. Not because I am brave. Because I finally know the names of things. If you grew up in a place where your experience was handed back to you renamed, I see you. If the people around you agreed on a version of events that did not include your version, you were not crazy. You were not faithless. You were not spiritually weak. You were human. And the system around you was designed to make that feel like a problem. It was never a problem. It was always just the truth. My name is Martha, and this is Hannah the Amish Girl, the channel where we finally say the things we were never supposed to say out loud. Subscribe. Leave me a comment. Tell me if any part of this story found the part of you that has been quietly waiting to be found. I have so many more truths waiting.